The most famous movie ever made almost didn't happen. It was chaos. Pure chaos. The producer was running on pills and peanuts. The script was rewritten so many times no one knew what story they were telling, and the actors were pushed so hard they nearly broke. There were riots over the casting, a firing so scandalous it had to be covered up, and a premiere that shut down an entire city. And yet, it became the greatest film in history. Let's uncover the craziest behind-the-scenes story of making Gone with the Wind. When Gone with the Wind book was published on June 30th, 1936, no one could have guessed how wildly successful it would become. That summer alone, the book sold an incredible 50,000 copies, breaking records for its time. The overwhelming response turned Margaret Mitchell into an instant celebrity. By December of that year, she stopped signing copies altogether because the attention became too much for her. In 1937, the novel won both the National Book Award and the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, cementing its place as a literary masterpiece. Over the years, its popularity only grew. By 2014, it had sold more than 30 million copies worldwide and was named Americans' second favorite book after the Bible. Mitchell's novel didn't just sell, it reshaped how people thought about the Civil War and the South, leaving an impact that continues to this day. Despite the book's success, making it into a movie wasn't an obvious choice at first. David O. Selznick, the man who would eventually bring it to the big screen, wasn't immediately interested. When the idea first came to him, he didn't even read the book. Instead, he skimmed through a 150-page summary while on vacation in Honolulu. Selznick had his doubts for several reasons. The biggest obstacle was the cost. Buying the rights to the novel would cost $50,000, an enormous amount in the 1930s. On top of that, Selznick wasn't sure a Civil War movie would work, and he hesitated for a long time. In the end, though, he couldn't stand the thought of another studio snatching it up, so he decided to take the risk. That decision would go on to define his career. The deal for the film rights became one of the most famous gambles in Hollywood history. After intense negotiations, Selznick bought the rights in June 1936 for $50,000, the highest price ever paid for a debut novel at that time. Other studios had shown interest in the book, but Selznick's bold offer secured the deal. That $50,000 was just the beginning. The movie's final production budget reached an eye-watering $3.7 million, and with added costs like advertising and distribution, the total came to nearly $4 million. But the main problem was not a cost. The search for Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind became one of Hollywood's most ambitious and expensive casting efforts.
And just what do you want me to do?
To begin with, give up the veil, Scarlett.
It lasted from July 1936 to January 1939, with producer David O. Selznick leading a massive nationwide hunt. Over 1,400 unknown actresses were interviewed, and 400 of them were asked to do readings. Alongside this, 31 famous actresses, including Katharine Hepburn, Bette Davis, Joan Crawford, and Carole Lombard, participated in formal screen tests. The search became so popular that the New York Times jokingly called it a national emergency. Interestingly, Vivien Leigh, who ultimately won the role, was barely noticed in audience polls. Out of hundreds of ballots, she received just one vote. The casting process stretched on for years, with actresses testing at various times. Tallulah Bankhead tested in 1936, Susan Hayward in 1937, and Paulette Goddard in 1938. By late 1938, the final contenders were narrowed down to Paulette Goddard and Vivien Leigh. Both completed Technicolor screen tests on December 21, 1938. When Leigh was chosen, it caused an uproar among Southerners who objected to a British actress playing Scarlett. The backlash even led to Georgians mailing live June bugs to Leigh when she admitted she didn't know what they were. This odd protest became such a problem that the California agricultural authorities had to stop the mailings to protect local crops. Getting Clark Gable for the role of Rhett Butler wasn't any easier. Gable was reluctant at first, calling it a woman's picture, and worrying it would hurt his tough guy image. Adding to the challenge, he was under an exclusive contract with MGM, which rarely lent its stars to other studios. Selznick made a deal in August 1938 with MGM's Louis B. Mayer, who was also Selznick's father-in-law. MGM agreed to loan Gable and provide $1.25 million for half of the film's budget. In exchange, Selznick had to pay Gable's $4,500 weekly salary and give MGM half of the film's profits for the first 7 years. Mayer even helped Gable financially with his divorce so he could marry actress Carole Lombard. Gable only became available after finishing his work on Idiot's Delight, which ended in December 1938. This deal gave MGM worldwide distribution rights, fundamentally changing how the film's finances worked.
He was expelled from West Point, he's so fast. And then there's that business about that girl he wouldn't marry.
Even before filming began, the production faced major financial challenges. By June 1938, Selznick had already spent $400,000 of his own money on pre-production. With funds running out, he turned to financier Jock Whitney, who invested $1 million to keep the project alive. The budget eventually ballooned to $4.25 million, an enormous amount at a time when most films cost under $1 million. Script development was another expensive headache. Adapting Margaret Mitchell's massive 1,037-page novel into a screenplay was a daunting task. When David O. Selznick bought the rights in 1936, he realized that filming the entire book would result in a 168-hour movie, something clearly impossible. He hired Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright Sidney Howard to write the screenplay, and Howard's first draft was 6 hours long, a 400-page script that still needed massive trimming. During intense editing sessions with Selznick, they made difficult decisions to simplify the story. Entire characters, like Scarlett O'Hara's extended family and children from her first 2 marriages, were removed. However, Howard fought to keep Frank Kennedy, believing Scarlett's marriages were crucial to her character's development. When Howard refused to return to Hollywood to revise the script, Selznick brought in other writers. Joe Swerling worked on it briefly, but Selznick wasn't happy. He then hired F. Scott Fitzgerald, who had an unusual task. He could only use words from the novel. This forced him to carefully search the book for the exact phrases he needed. Fitzgerald's approach made the drama quieter and more subtle, especially in scenes like Scarlett watching Ashley and Melanie together. He also refined iconic moments, like Rhett buying a dance from Scarlett and the escape from burning Atlanta. The script went through so many changes that Selznick used different colored pages to track each writer's contributions.
Can't think of anything but that $300.
Ain't no good thing about that, Miss Scarlett. Ain't nobody got that much money.
In 1939, Selznick turned to Ben Hecht, offering him $15,000 for just 1 week of work. The problem? Hecht had never read the book, and neither had the film's director, Victor Fleming. Selznick spent over an hour narrating the entire story to them. At first, Hecht doubted anyone could turn such a complex plot into a coherent movie. But when he read Howard's original draft, he recognized its brilliance and used it as a foundation. He worked non-stop, often for 18 to 24 hours a day, while Selznick and Fleming acted out scenes to help him understand the characters. The rewriting process became chaotic and exhausting. Selznick, desperate to save time and money with production costs hitting $65,000 per day, imposed strange rules.
Well, cheer up. Maybe you'll have an accident.
He banned meals during work, allowing only bananas and salted peanuts, thinking proper food would slow them down. Fueled by Benzedrine to stay awake, Selznick pushed himself and his team to the edge. Fleming's eye burst from the stress, and Selznick collapsed while eating a banana. Despite the madness, the rewrites during this intense period became the backbone of what would turn into one of the most celebrated films in history. When the script got ready, another drama unfolded with the firing of director George Cukor. He had spent 2 years preparing and only 18 days filming when he was suddenly removed. The official reason was creative differences with producer David O. Selznick, but there was more to the story. Clark Gable, one of the film's stars, strongly disliked Cukor. Gable feared that Cukor might know about rumors from his early Hollywood days, where it was said he worked as a male hustler, with some claiming Cukor was one of his clients. This tension boiled over on set, with Gable shouting he wouldn't work with Cukor, calling him a derogatory term. Cukor's firing upset the female stars Vivien Leigh and Olivia de Havilland, who had bonded with him. They were so affected by his departure that they secretly continued to meet with him for acting advice during filming. Victor Fleming replaced Cukor, but came into the film under tough circumstances. Fleming was already directing The Wizard of Oz and had to leave that film unfinished. He took over Gone with the Wind and immediately started making big changes. The script was rewritten in just 5 days with screenwriter Ben Hecht, which added to the chaos. Fleming worked so hard that he had a nervous breakdown and had to temporarily leave the project. During his absence, another director, Sam Wood, stepped in, meaning 2 directors worked on the movie at the same time. Fleming eventually returned but pushed himself and the cast to their limits, working long hours 7 days a week. Vivien Leigh, who played Scarlett O'Hara, faced her own challenges. Being British, she had to learn a Southern accent, which became a big concern for producer Selznick. He even received letters from Southerners urging him to get the accent right, and he hired coaches to help Leigh perfect it. During a break in filming, Selznick worried Leigh's accent would slip because she was spending time with other British people. The pressure on her was immense, especially since many people didn't believe a British actress could convincingly play a Southern belle. Moreover, the working relationship between director Victor Fleming and Vivien Leigh became infamous. Fleming's rough, macho style clashed with Leigh's refined British manner. Their arguments were intense, with Fleming once telling her to put the script up her royal British ass. Leigh's workload was grueling, 16-hour days, 6 days a week, with little rest. This led to emotional breakdowns and mood swings, which were made worse by physical discomforts like having her breasts tightly bound for some scenes. Leigh hated the experience so much that she often called her husband, Laurence Olivier, to vent, saying she never wanted to act in a movie again. Clark Gable, on the other hand, refused to use a Southern accent for his role as Rhett Butler. Despite being from Ohio, Gable felt a Southern drawl would ruin his tough guy image. He flat out refused to work with a dialogue coach and wouldn't even read the book Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell, which his wife, Carol Lombard, had gifted him. Selznick had to choose between losing Gable or compromising on the accent. Since Selznick had gone to great lengths to secure Gable for the role, including selling MGM a share in the film, he had no choice but to let Gable do it his way. David O. Selznick, the producer, suffered greatly under the pressure. He became addicted to Benzedrine, a stimulant, and worked endlessly, often dictating memos late into the night. His health was further strained by heavy smoking, drinking, and gambling. He lost over $500,000 in 1946 alone. Selznick was also notorious for his inappropriate behavior toward women on set. His obsession with controlling every detail of the film, from costumes to camera angles, wore him down. He even tried to involve the film's editor in directing to save money, though that plan never worked out. The making of Gone with the Wind in 1939 was a long, grueling process, filled with challenges that tested everyone involved. The schedule was brutal, with the cast and crew working up to 20 hours a day. Filming the famous As God Is My Witness scene was especially intense. To get the perfect sunrise backdrop, producer David O. Selznick made Vivien Leigh and the crew start work at 2:30 a.m. for an entire week. The stress of such long hours was overwhelming. Vivien Leigh's mood swings worsened, and she eventually suffered a minor nervous breakdown. Even the director, Victor Fleming, became so exhausted that he almost drove his car off a cliff. He had to take 2 weeks off to recover. The workload was so extreme that the film needed 4 directors and over a dozen scriptwriters to get it done. The relentless pace wasn't sustainable, and many turned to drugs to keep going. Selznick was infamous for his addiction to Benzedrine, which he used to stay alert and in control. He often crushed the tablets and ate them piece by piece. Over time, his drug use escalated to dangerous levels, combining stimulants like Benzedrine and methadone with barbiturates. He smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day, fueling his obsessive behavior. Selznick's drug-fueled intensity led to strange fixations during production, such as his obsession with Vivien Leigh's chest measurements and eye color. He demanded countless retakes and even called makeup artists in the middle of the night to discuss the exact shade of her eyeshadow. The press dubbed the project Selznick's Folly because of its constant problems. The budget was blown before the action scenes were even filmed. Selznick's perfectionism, worsened by his drug use, caused endless script changes and retakes. Now everyone was waiting for release date. The premiere of Gone with the Wind on December 15, 1939, was unlike anything Atlanta had ever seen. Nearly 300,000 people gathered at the Loew's Grand Theater to witness the event, a crowd larger than the combined armies at the 1864 Battle of Atlanta. To keep things under control, the city brought in 400 National Guardsmen and 120 police officers. At the Georgian Terrace Hotel, where the stars stayed, 30 officers were assigned just to protect Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh. Along Peachtree Street, police formed human chains for 7 miles to manage the enormous crowd. The celebrations lasted 3 whole days. There was a massive costume ball with 6,000 attendees, a grand parade of film stars, and Confederate flags flying everywhere. Limousines carrying the stars drove through the streets as people lined up for miles to catch a glimpse. When Vivien Leigh arrived, the warm welcome brought her to tears. The excitement was so overwhelming that one young woman fainted after staring at Clark Gable for too long, exclaiming she couldn't handle it anymore. Georgia's governor, Urith D. Rivers, marked the occasion by declaring December 15th a state holiday. Atlanta's mayor, William B. Hartsfield, extended the festivities and encouraged residents to dress in Civil War-era fashion. Women wore hoop skirts and pantalettes, while men were asked to grow sideburns and whiskers. However, the celebrations had a darker side. Due to Georgia's Jim Crow laws, the film's black stars, including Hattie McDaniel, were not allowed to attend the premiere. Even Clark Gable considered skipping the event in protest, but Hattie McDaniel urged him to go. The venue itself, Loew's Grand Theater, was segregated and whites only, reflecting the racial inequalities of the time. Despite these controversies, Gone with the Wind became a monumental success. Adjusted for inflation, it remains the highest-grossing film in history, earning around $3.4 billion in today's dollars. The movie had a budget of $3.85 million, making it one of the most expensive films ever made at the time. In the end, all the challenges paid off. The film won 8 Academy Awards, including a historic win for Hattie McDaniel, who became the first black person to receive an Oscar. Gone with the Wind held the record as the highest-grossing film for over 30 years and became one of the first movies preserved in the National Film Registry in 1989. Its legacy as a cultural and cinematic icon remains unmatched.